if I'm not wrong, Shadows, the first film by John Cassavetes, won the first prize of the magazine Film Culture. And Film Culture was a very important magazine directed by Jonas Mikas, devoted mainly to the independent American cinema and especially the underground experimental cinema. I think that Jonas Mikas prized the first version of Shadows, which is now, I don't know, I think that Cassavetes destroyed his first version of Shadows. And he re-edited his film, perhaps he reshot something, I don't know exactly. Anyway, Shadows was an exception in the American cinema since Cassavetes was an actor, quite well known when he made this film. And this film had a big success. And I remember that I've seen it in Italy, dubbed. You can imagine a film like this, which is very realistic, very shot in the streets, dubbed. So I didn't like it when I saw it the first time. But I think that one of the reasons was the dubbing. But this was the only, no, perhaps not the only contact of Cassavetes with the American independent scene. I think that the film that I prefer by Cassavetes is Faces, which was shot independently. I think that they shot an enormous amount of negative, and then the film is quite long now, but it's the film that I personally prefer. I've seen this at the Venice Film Festival in, I don't remember when. And then Cassavetes did something quite different in the mainstream kind of production, but with a style which was very peculiar to him, and this style comes from the experiences in documentaries, like what Richard Leacock or the Maitels brothers or Penny Baker did in the States. Okay. It's kind of direct cinema. So it's what Cassavetes did was to adapt the techniques of direct cinema to fiction films. Being an actor, he was wonderful in directing actors, although not always he is part of the cast. In some films he plays as actor too, in other films he doesn't play at all. And I don't know when he met Gina Rowlands, which was something like an alter ego, a feminine alter ego of Cassavetes in the way in which she was playing. I don't know how the independent American scene received the other films by Cassavetes. I have no idea what Jonas Mikas, for example, reviewing them in the Village Voice, if he reviewed them, thought of these films. As a matter of fact, the independent American scene of the 60s was a wonderful moment for the art of cinema. I remember being for the first time in the States, coming from Montreal, where there was the first festival in which Roberto Rossellini was the president of the jury. And I made the trip from Rome to Montreal with Rossellini, and I remained in Montreal with Rossellini. It was a great experience, actually. And then we, also Rossellini too, came to New York, and I was very interested at that period. I am speaking of 1965. I was 25 years old at that time. And I was very interested in the direct cinema. So I missed completely the underground scene. I didn't know about it. I'd heard someone saying, oh, in the Greenwich Village there is strange things happening. But I was interested. I interviewed Richard Leacock, the Maidels, Pennebaker. I saw the films of the direct cinema, but nothing of the underground cinema, which I discovered later in another trip which I made in 1970. After a great retrospective at the Pedro Film Festival in 1967 of the American underground cinema. I was very, very involved with it, and much more being in New York in 1970, where I saw all that I could see at the Anthology Film Archives of the underground scene, and I met some of the filmmakers. This changed my life. Before this, I was, so to speak, the discoverer for Italy of the classical American cinema, which was completely under-evaluated in Italy. I had a magazine, two magazines. I began writing in the early 60s, 1960 actually, I was 20 only. And my objective was to say that directors like Hitchcock, Howard Hawks, the American Fritz Lang, John Ford, etc., were great directors, which this was something completely against the trade of film criticism in Italy. But then, with the discovery of the underground cinema, I changed it completely. And I'm still someone who likes more the experimental cinema than the fiction cinema. Because I think that still today there is a great amount of works, not only abroad but also in Italy, which are not experimental like the American underground, but experimental in the way they conceive both the fiction and the documentary side. But so it's not strictly experimental, it's the way in which they invent something new. So to go back to Cassavetes, I think that Cassavetes, which is someone who is very well praised in Italy, is a figure that is the missing chain between the mainstream fiction cinema and the experimental cinema. It's someone who worked in between, and I think that his way of doing films influenced a lot of filmmakers of the future.